We thank the Russian Federation for organizing this timely, open debate on a topic of growing relevance. I also thank the briefers for their insights. There are two key aspects to the title of today's debate: promoting effective multilateralism and doing it, as the chair calls it, through the defense of the principles of the UN Charter. Even as we debate this issue and would like effective multilateralism to prevail, we are collectively aware of the inadequacies of the multilateral system that has failed to respond to contemporary challenges, whether it be the COVID pandemic or the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Moreover, significant global challenges such as terrorism, radicalism, climate justice and climate action, disruptive non-state actors, debt and several geopolitical contestations continue to undermine global peace and security. Given this context, today's debate should address three pressing questions. Question 1. Can we practice multilateralism effectively in the 21st century through a body that celebrates the principle "to the victor belong the spoils privileged more than 3 generations ago"? Question 2. Can we actually promote effective multilateralism through defending a UN Charter where 2 of the permanent members have not been able to even get their names changed? Article 109 of the Charter never wanted it to be cast in stone for perpetuity, and that is why it had recommended a General Review Conference of the Charter to be held before the 10th UN General Assembly. 77 years later, we are nowhere closer to making that a reality. Question 3. Can we practice effective multilateralism by defending a charter that makes 5 nations more equal than others and provides to each of those 5 the power to ignore the collective will of the remaining 188 member states? Mr. President, how much longer will we keep decorating effective multilateralism with the intent of reforming multilateralism with only words and mere lip service? Our starting premise has to be widening the representation of this core institution, the Security Council, to more developing countries for its effectiveness and credibility. If we continue to perpetuate the 1945 anachronistic mindset, we will continue to lose the faith our people have in the United Nations. India was a founding signatory to the UN Charter when it was signed on 26 June 1945 in San Francisco. 77 years later, when we see the world's largest democracy along with entire continents of Africa and Latin America being kept out of global decision-making, we rightly call for a major course correction. In this regard, I am happy to note that the recent report of the UNSC's High-Level Advisory Board on Effective Multilateralism has recognized the inevitability of reform of the Security Council and has called for a renewed effort in that direction. To quote from the report, "The Summit of the Future is an opportunity to reaffirm our common commitment to the UN Charter and announce a Charter Review Conference focused on Security Council reform." Unquote. This past September, the UNGA had heard a similar call for reform from more than 70 global leaders. As my External Affairs Minister had said in this Council's open debate on 14 December 2022, and I quote, "Our common agenda and the Summit of the Future will only deliver results if they respond to the growing calls for reformed multilateralism. Reform is the need of the day, and I am confident that the Global South especially shares India's determination to persevere." Unquote. Multilateral institutions, Mr. President, rarely die. They simply fade into irrelevance. Once upon a time, there was a very long distance between the model UN role play in colleges and universities and the real world. Is that distance shrinking? Lastly, this August forum has today heard some mischievous remarks by a permanent representative arising purely out of ignorance and lack of an understanding on the basic facts of decolonization. I will not be wasting the time of this Council in responding to those remarks. Our advice to that delegation is, please refer to our numerous rights of reply that we have expressed in the past. Thank you.
Я благодарю представителя.
I thank India for that statement and now give the floor to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela has the honor to take the floor on behalf of the group of friends in defense of the Charter of the United Nations. At the outset, allow us to welcome you and your whole team to New York and to convey our appreciation to the delegation of the Russian Federation, a fellow member of our group of friends, for convening this open debate on such an important and critical theme, particularly in the midst of the current international juncture, while expressing also our appreciation to the Russian delegation for having prepared the conceptual note previously circulated for guiding our discussions today. Mr. President, over the past 77 years, the United Nations have made great achievements in various fields. Nevertheless, the fulfillment of the promise contained in the Charter of the United Nations remains elusive to humanity. The three pillars of our organization, international peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights, are yet to be fully realized. And while the UN has indeed had many success stories to show, for instance, in averting a conflagration at the global scale, today's world is not precisely a safer one, neither from the point of view of security or economic, financial, environmental, energy, or food standpoint. Now, this reality, as we are aware, is the result of multiple factors. Nevertheless, there are a few of them worthy of mentioning today, in light of the tremendous impact that they have had over the years on the international relations system. We're referring, Mr. President, to attempts to ignore and even replace the purposes and principles enshrined in the UN Charter with a new set of so-called rules that to date remain unknown, or the attempts to disregard the obligations and commitments arising from relevant international agreements and treaties to which members of the international community are parties, including on the basis of claims to non-existent exceptionalism. Also, there are the attempts to divide our world into blocks. There are attempts to have selective approaches or accommodative interpretations of the norms of international law. And finally, the continued attacks against multilateralism, which has precisely the United Nations as its standard bearer. In parallel, Mr. President, there's also a growing resort to unilateralism, which can be largely seen among other measures in the illegal application of unilateral coercive measures against more than 30 countries worldwide in flagrant violation of international law. Now, and even though this is trying to be hidden, this is a reality that is negatively affecting the daily lives of over one-third of humanity. These so-called sanctions, which have exponentially increased over the years, and which can be defined as a new form of a attempt at domination and neocolonialism, have, as a matter of fact, been used against especially developing countries to put pressure, to force the sovereign will of another state in order to obtain from it advantages of various kinds, while generating at the same time untold suffering of entire peoples. These illegal measures not only have created a systemic crisis in the entire system of international relations that continues to erode multilateralism, but also they are at this very moment deliberately exacerbating the global multifaceted crisis, while they also increase uncertainty and instability, fuel mistrust and tensions around the world. This is the reason why we continue to insist on the pressing need for the complete, immediate, and unconditional lifting of these measures. Mr. President, it is in light of this reality and in response to the increasing threats against the Charter of the United Nations, and therefore the urgent need to reaffirm and defend its purposes and principles, which today I think it should be said are as relevant as they were in 1945, that this is why almost 2 years ago a cross-regional group of countries came together and decided to establish this group of friends as part of its firm commitment to preserving, promoting, and defending the validity and relevance of the Universal Code of Conduct that is given to us by the UN Charter. In this context, we'd like to underscore the importance we attach to ensuring compliance with and strict adherence to both the letter and the spirit of the charter of this organization, and of the timeless principles contained therein, including the sovereign equality of states, the self-determination, the non-interference in the internal affairs of states, to refrain from the threat or the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. To proceed in any other manner, we believe, would only keep us farther apart from our common aspiration of establishing a more peaceful and prosperous world and a truly just, democratic, and equitable world order, while at the same time hindering our ability to provide for a dignified life and a future of peace and development for all our peoples, in line with our pledge of leaving no one behind. Mr. President, multilateralism is the collective action and the search for solutions together to common problems. This is why we concur with the statement contained in the concept note for today's open debate, that multilateralism indeed makes it possible to facilitate inter alia long-term stability, indivisible security, and good neighborliness. We also believe in this regard that the solution to the new and complex challenges that we face today requires the strengthening and revitalization of an inclusive multilateralism in which all countries, big or small, all of them are effectively engaged in this discussion, because each national contribution is essential for achieving the goals that motivated the establishment of this organization back in 1945. Consequently, this also requires, on the one hand, achieving the democratization of international relations, as well as consolidating a multipolar system that is necessarily rooted in the United Nations Charter. And on the other hand, it requires the total elimination of unilateralism in all its forms and manifestations. In light of everything I've said, the United Nations